Welcome to Exploring with Corin. I'm your host, Corin Young, and I'm excited to share with you this new podcast where I explore all kinds of topics that interest me. I think it's very fitting that we dive into the world of podcasting today, as this is something that I've been interested in for a while. My very first guest is a blogger, a technologist, and an early adopter. He's the first person that I ever knew that had a mini disc player, a Tesla, or an Apple Watch. Back in 2010, there were very few people that were making podcasts. You had Joe Rogan, you had Stuff You Should Know, and my cousin. I've always looked up to him for his insight into the world of tech. Please welcome Zak Winnick.
Hey, well, thank you for that great intro. I didn't know you look up to me. Now I feel like really special. Thank you.
Well, you've been taller than me since we were in kindergarten.
Yeah, that's true. So I guess you didn't really have a choice.
No. But we did all kinds of stuff growing up, a lot of it in the world of video production and audio production, playing with video cameras. I remember when you got your first video camera, that big one with the VCR that you strap.
It was the VCR, and then it had like the controller deck or something, and then it was like this massive camera that looked like a broadcast camera. Yeah, I remember that thing was awesome.
That was fun.
Yeah,
and we used my camera too and did like a 2-camera set, and we also made early podcasts before there were podcasts. There was a device that you had, that gray. I don't remember if it was TIAC or Tascam, but it was a little mini recorder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that. I don't
a tape deck, a built-in like microphone, a microphone input, sound effects, and like an auxiliary input.
Yeah, and it was like a 4-track recorder too, which was awesome because it went straight to cassette, and then you can mix in like whatever you wanted. Yeah, man.
Yeah,
dude, I totally forgot about that thing. I had 2 of them because I had a white one, and then like the newer version came out, and then that was the gray one. Like, oh man.
Oh, I only remember the gray one.
Yeah.
But yeah, we used to record all kinds of programs and interviews and make like a lot of people used to make mixtapes where they just like put a lot of their favorite songs, and we would do that, but we would also like kind of DJ it. Like we would talk about the different songs.
Yeah.
And there's one tape in particular that I remember you creating that had one song looping over and over and over.
Oh,
and
God.
Each time you came back, you said, "Man, I love that song. I just got to hear it again." Do you remember what song that was?
I don't, but I know you do. I'm gonna be like totally embarrassed because of it.
I'll give you a hint. It was performed by Robin Williams.
Oh, was it? It was the one for. It was the Batty Rap.
What was the Batty Rap?
The Batty Rap from Ferngully. Jesus. Yeah, I was obsessed with that song. I liked anything Robin Williams did at that time, and like that was one of my favorite movies, mainly because the main character's name was Zak Young, and he spelled.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. It was hilarious. His name was Zak Young, and he spelled his name the same way I spell mine. So I'm like,
wow, how did I not ever notice that?
I don't know. I just remember walking out of the theater, and my mom was like, if I never married your father, that would be your name. I'm like, great. It's like 5 years old, and I'm just like, great, thanks for that.
Yeah, well, that's a whole different paradox. Yeah, you wouldn't be you.
I mean, I would be in some form or another, but yeah.
Yeah, one in a billion shot.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and it's funny you mention that, because the earliest I remember doing anything remotely close to that, I don't even remember it really. It's more of like one of those things where it's like, oh well, I heard myself doing this, and like I remember it. I was around 2 years old, and my dad. So let me take a step back really quick. My dad always had like the newest stuff. Like he was one of the first people to have like not mini disc, a CD player. He had a reel-to-reel machine in the house. I mean, obviously we had that giant video camera. So one of the first things he introduced me to was like an audio, like a tape recorder, and he used to set it up on the kitchen table and just like kind of interview me. And so like my mom has the tape somewhere in the house, and it's me 2 years old talking to my dad, and I don't even remember what we were talking about. You can barely understand me. But yeah, so I think from an early age I was kind of always wanting to do something like that.
Yeah, I'd like to hear that. That sounds like it could be fun to listen to.
Yeah, if you ask my mom, she'll probably have no clue what you're talking about or even know where it is. But one day I'll get in that house and find it, and we'll have.
Yeah, good luck.
Thanks.
Did you take John Amador's class, the audio class at COC?
I took both of his because he had a audio production 1 and audio production 2. And the first year I started at College of the Canyons was the first year that he did a radio production class. And the fun part about that was I just came off an internship at a radio station in Santa Monica, actually. And so he didn't know what he was.
Rock and roll station.
Yeah, it was called worldclassrock.com. It was actually one of the first radio stations to go from terrestrial radio to the internet streaming.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, we shared the office with 2 other radio stations. One, I don't remember what it was. I think it was like a smooth jazz station or something. But the other one was KNAC, which is a really famous LA radio station. They always played like metal and like all this stuff. And so my first week there, so let me back up another step on that one. So I'd always been a fan of the radio station. The girl that was the program director, her name was Nicole Sandler. She was Mark and Brian's producer for like 20 years. She was really big in LA radio. She moved from Mark and Brian to go start a radio station, 1019 KSCA, and she used to do the morning show. And I'd always wake up and listen to her, and I loved her. She was great, and her partner, Chuck Moshantz. They would do Nicole and Chuck in the morning, and they'd always play all the music that I love, like U2, Dave Matthews Band, Coldplay, things like that. And actually, that's where I first heard Dave Matthews Band, and now I'm like a huge DMB fan, but that's a different story. Anyway, so she followed that station and went from 1019 KSCA to 1031. I don't remember the call letters on that, but then Clear Channel, which was the company that ran it at the time, now iHeartRadio, decided to take it off the air and put it on this new streaming platform that they were coming out with. And so I was going to school in San Francisco at the time. I was going to SF State, and I would listen to the station all the time up there, even though they had a great, it's called AAA, Adult Album Alternative. Great AAA station up there too, KFOG 1045. But I knew I was coming home for the summer, and I emailed her one day, and I'm just like, "Hey, Nicole, she knew who I was because they had like a forum on their website, so you can interact with the DJs and request songs and interact with all the other listeners and everything else." And so I emailed her one day and was like, "Hey, Nicole, I'm coming home for the summer. I was wondering if like you had any internships or anything open." And so she's like, "Well, we don't really do internships, so let me find out." And then a couple days later, she emails me. She's like, "The internship's yours if you want it." I'm like, "Awesome!" So
wow, they created it for you.
Basically, yeah. I was the one and only intern at worldclassrock.com ever, because about 3 days into my internship, I started on a Monday. That Wednesday, I walk into the office, and Nicole was practically in tears because Clear Channel decided that the radio station wasn't making enough money, and decided to get rid of all of the on-air talent. So it was basically a regular radio station, and they programmed 6-hour blocks at a time, and they had DJs, and Nicole handpicked all the DJs and everything, and they were all like her friends, and they all came over from like other stations and stuff. And they basically told her, they're like, "Well, you're going to run the station, but you're going to fire everybody else." And she's like, "No, I'm going to leave too." So that Friday was her last day, and then for the next 2.5 months, basically, it was just me running that radio station because Clear Channel dumped it on the guy that was running KNAC. His name is Paul Long. If anybody's listening to this podcast that listened to KNAC, his radio name was Long Paul. Little tiny short dude, had long hair, had a handlebar mustache, awesome radio voice. And so like the first day I met him as my new boss, technically, he's like, "Yeah, I know nothing about any of this music, so I'm just going to teach you how to program everything, and then you can go in every day or every week and program it yourself." I'm like, "Okay, great." And I'm like, "I'm assuming, that, you only really know metal." And he's like, "No, I'm a jazz saxophone player." I'm like, "You're joking." He's like, "No, dude, I really play jazz saxophone." I'm like, "Okay." So I did 3 months at worldclassrock.com, and then I decided not to go back up to San Francisco. That's why I ended up back at COC. And first class I registered for was Amador's radio production. And so I walked in first day. I'm like, hey, I just came off an internship at a radio station. If you need help, he's like, perfect, because I don't know what I'm doing, basically. And so I helped him with that. And actually, that's how him and I became friends. So then I took all the rest of his classes, the 3 years that I was there.
Yeah, I remember taking those classes too, and I wanted to get into audio production from a post-production standpoint, about how we could use it for film and television. But in that first semester class, I want to say Audio 170, we ended up making radio broadcasts, so we were playing music. I recorded a few of them. So there was one that I did where I had the music of like Bare Naked Ladies and Weird Al Yankovic and They Might Be Giants, and I got to kind of DJ it and talk about it. There's another one that I did that was kind of like a parody interview where I recorded myself interacting with pre-recorded interviews by other people. But it was weird recording these radio broadcasts to tape in a format that people could listen to when they want to, instead of on the radio at a specific time. But that's basically a podcast before there was even the iPods.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's kind of what we were going for with that too, because I don't know if they ever launched it. I thought they did, but one of the things that we were working on when I was there was KUGR radio. And it was going to be streaming internet radio, but we were also going to do, like, if you missed the 11 to 1 show, like, the Zany Zach show, whatever you want to call it, you can go back and listen to it, and in on demand, so to speak. So we were looking at that too, and little did we know that at the same time there was podcasting that was being created by Adam Curry and Dave Weiner, and like a delivery system and all that stuff. Like, we were just going to throw it up on a website and call it a day,
Yeah, there's still some pretty cool stuff in the works, both in terms of a streaming service, and COC's also partnered with somebody at KHUG, who has an FM radio transmitter, and so he broadcasts stuff from home, and you can send him content, and he puts it online.
Cool. But yeah, so once I graduated college and moved to Las Vegas, that was around 2004. That's when I started podcasting, and came up with the podcast. I called it the Desert Surf Report, because I was living in Las Vegas, and I always used to love surfing, and I'm like, all right, well, this is kind of cool. And I learned a little bit about how it worked with like RSS feeds and hosting it on a website and the enclosures and all that stuff. But yeah, I would sit there in my living room with a microphone and I think I was using it was an M-Box. Remember that? The M-Box 2 from DigiDesign?
I've got a lot of them that I bought within the last year from an auction. A company, Post House, went out of business, and I ended up with like 9 M-Box 2 minis.
Oh my God.
So if you know anyone that needs some.
I don't.
Yeah, they don't work with any of the new OSs.
Yeah, it blows me away too that, like, back in the day, this is a complete tangent. Like, back in the day when you wanted to use Pro Tools, you had to have Pro Tools hardware, and now you don't have to. And I think that's awesome.
Yeah, they've changed the whole system.
Yeah. Anyway. So yeah, I had this SM58 that I'm recording my audio on, and MBox 2, and I would just sit there and record into Pro Tools and mix my vocals. I'd mix in some music and do like a little music podcast. And actually, one of the ones I remember, and I think I have the CD somewhere, because I burn them to CD so that way I can go listen to them in my car, because it was before you can put them on iPods, I think. Or before there was an automated way to do it, I guess, like a commercially available one. I was going to Texas because my friend had a drum and bugle corps that was going to march in the Mardi Gras parades in New Orleans. So
cool.
It was my first time going to Texas. So I'm like, all right, this is really funny. I'll talk about going to Texas, and then I'll just play all these songs that have to do with Texas. So like I had like the Dallas TV show theme song. I had All My Exes Live in Texas. I had Screw You, We're from Texas by Kinky Friedman, which is a great song if you've never heard it. He does another one called Snake Farm, which is an actual place outside of Austin called the Snake Farm, and it's literally just like a farm with snakes. But yeah, so I mean, like that was the stuff that I played on that. So like, you know, I'd always try to do like a theme. But yeah, that's how I kind of got into podcasting, and then I kind of got tired of doing that. Like I have really bad OCD when it comes to podcasting. Like I'll do like 7 or 8 episodes and be like, you know what, this doesn't work for me anymore. Like me personally, like I could have like 300 or 400 people listening. I'll just be like, nope, I'm gonna change and do a completely different format. So the next podcast that I did, it was actually we'll call it a shower thought. Like I was sitting there one morning in the shower, well, standing, and sorry, and I came up with an idea for a podcast. So I don't call myself a musician anymore, but I was one before. I played an instrument called the Chapman stick, and
Is this the Stickist podcast?
yeah, not the Stickist podcast, because there is one called the Stickist podcast.
That's the other one. What was
Mine
yours?
was StickWorld, the StickWorld podcast.
StickWorld.
Yeah, that's it. And I did that. It was a podcast dedicated to the music of the Chapman stick. And right around maybe about a year into it, it was the longest podcast I'd ever done, like longest over time. And it actually gained enough notoriety that I was actually a new and noteworthy podcast on the iTunes store. I have a screen capture of it somewhere. I was like number 4 or 5 or something. It was awesome. But then I decided, again, my OCD kicked in. I'm like, hey, YouTube's like really coming up now, and there's a lot.
Is that your ADD?
ADD, OCD? Yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, my OCD is not kicking in about my ADD. So I decided to do the StickWorld video cast, and I would rip videos from YouTube and edit them together and kind of do like an MTV type thing in my studio in my old house in Vegas. And there's some still out there somewhere, but because you could do video podcasting into iTunes, so I just did that and just ran the video through the RSS feed too. So it was interesting. What camera was I using? I had a digital 8 camera that I could hook up to my computer.
Oh, right.
So I had a Sony Digital 8 camera that I hooked up to my PowerBook G4. Tells you how old this is. It was actually
I still have mine.
It was the last PowerBook G4. It was the 1.67 gigahertz one.
Whoa.
Yeah, dude. Nice. I love that computer. That was awesome. But yeah, I had that, and that was and actually the funny thing about that too, I'll tell this story too because it's kind of fun and it deals with technology and podcasting basically. Tom Green. We all know Tom Green.
I remember you on there.
Yeah. So he used to do a show from his house, and he, anyway, so
now everybody does that.
Yeah,
but
I was going to say now everybody's doing
first.
what he was doing first. When was this? This was like 15 years ago, and I'll tell a little bit of a backstory on this too. My friend Joey and I used to go every Friday or every Thursday down to. I think it was in Burbank. It was MTV had a studio there, and Tom Green would record his Tom Green Live talk show in the studio. And so on Thursdays, he would do Thursday's show and then immediately do Friday's show, so that way he could have a 3-day weekend, or in case he wanted to go do like stand-up gigs somewhere or something like that. So my friend Joey and I we literally went every Friday from when the show first aired to we were actually there for the very last show that never aired. And like we became friends with all the producers and all the guys that worked on the crew and like all this stuff. And so one day they were doing a show and they had Tom Green's house, Tom Green's home, something like that. It was an internet show and he would stream it on the internet. And he had Kat Von D from LA Inc. on there, and he had somebody else who I can't remember. And the only reason why I remember Kat is because he had her on there because she just opened a tattoo parlor in Vegas. And where was I living at the time? Las Vegas. So one of his producers called me up and was like, hey, we know you live in Vegas. Do you want to be on the show? And, do you have the ability to go to like one of the casinos or something and record yourself on video and be interviewed by Tom? I'm like, I'll do you one better. I'll set my camera and everything up in my car, and I'll drive down the Las Vegas Strip, and that way you can see everything. And so,
Yeah, this was pre-iPhone, by the way, so nobody had the ability to do live video streaming.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you had your laptop hooked. It was tethered to something. I don't remember how you were doing it.
So AT&T used to sell these little USB dongles that were
That's what it was. Yeah,
it was I mean, essentially it was a cell phone, but all it was data. So I had that plugged into my laptop, and then I had my video camera plugged into the computer, and I had it mounted. I had a computer monitor stand. It was huge. I had it mounted to my dashboard. Put the camera on that. And then I was driving down the Las Vegas Strip, live streaming from Las Vegas to Tom Green in LA, and that was wild, man.
Yeah, I remember when he would throw it to you and say, "Hey, we're gonna check in with our Las Vegas correspondent, Zak Winnick. Zak, are you there?"
Yeah, and then there was a little bit of a delay, but that's kind of my claim to fame. And I found that clip, like that episode, online 4 or 5 years ago, and I saved it.
Oh, good. I've been looking for it. I can't find it.
I saved it on YouTube. Added it to my favorites.
Oh,
They took it down.
yeah. Okay, it's gone.
Yeah, but I just heard Tom Green on Joe Rogan's podcast. I don't listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. The only time I've ever listened to it was when he had Tom Green on and when he had Elon Musk on the last 2 times. And Tom said that he had like this huge server farm that he saved all of his stuff. So I think I still have his phone number saved in my phone. I might give him a call and be like, "Hey, I was just thinking about this."
Hit him up. Have you seen him recently on Instagram Live? He was in the news recently for falling asleep during his Instagram Live broadcast.
Yeah, I follow him on Instagram and Twitter. I've been a huge Tom Green fan since the original Tom Green show, like way back in the day. So
not the Green Tom Show.
Not the Green Tom Show. This is the Tom Green Show.
That's right.
Yeah. So
yeah, you had your Desert Surf Report. You had your StickWorld. You have a music one, Zax Trax.
Zax Trax. So that started off as a blog. I've done a few podcasts every once in a while, but the original reason why I got into all of this stuff was if you've ever seen the movie Almost Famous, the Cameron Crowe movie with Kate Hudson, I wanted to be the main character from Almost Famous, which is actually yeah, I know, right? Which is actually based on Cameron Crowe. It's basically a semi-autobiographical story because that's how he got his start. He was a writer for Rolling Stone, and so I always wanted to write for Rolling Stone, and so originally that's what I was studying in college. I was studying broadcast, and then I decided, like, hey, no, you know what? I want to study journalism. I love writing, and so I started doing that. And so Zax Trax, Zaxtrax, kind of was my outlet for that, and I did a couple of podcasts with it. I didn't like it. I kind of got spooked by the whole like licensing thing.
Yeah.
Never mind the fact that a couple years later, ASCAP, the publishing company, came out with a thing called the Play Now license, where basically you pay $200 a year, or it used to be $200 a year. I don't know what it is now, but it covers streaming services. So if you were streaming music like in your office or something like that, and you had your own mix, you could use this license to play the music. So I put on my lawyer hat, which is very tiny, and read through like the rules, and there was really no rule that said that you couldn't use this license for a podcast, because technically podcasts can stream, and they're on demand. So I just kind of used that as my, if I ever got flagged by the FCC or FTC or me, whoever whoever monitors podcasting, I guess it's the FCC. I could be like, nope, hey, I got this license here, like you can't get me. And then luckily I never got challenged, but
so that's pretty neat. So that would count. So what if you had like sponsors and you were getting paid for it or anything like that? Does that matter, or just $200 a year covers you to play whatever songs you want.
That
in there?
was before sponsors on podcasts were things. When that only started maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, when people realized that, oh, hey, we can make money off of podcasts, or I can make money doing a podcast. So that tells you how long it's been since I've done anything having to do with like a music podcast. Just because I don't know how that works now with sponsorships and stuff like that. I would assume that nothing really has changed, and you can still use that license and do it that way if you want it to be legal. I know there are people that don't do that. So I know a lot of podcasts that do play music, though, are covered by the licensing from like radio stations. So like a lot of radio stations have podcasts that they do with music. There's a really great one if anybody wants to listen to it, from KEXP in Seattle. They do great music podcasts, and like the music that they play is awesome. So it's like that Seattle music scene, and they play a lot of like bigger stuff too, but they're pretty good.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, and now you have a podcast that there's a couple that you post to with kind of some kind of frequency these days. It's kind of just your microcast, as you call it, where it's just your daily ramblings.
Yeah, so there's a great service called micro.blog, and basically it's for people that are tired of like social media, and they want to interact with people, which you don't have to do. That's the beauty of it. But the other part of it is you get your own website with it, and now they just introduced maybe 3 or 4 months ago, you can actually buy domain names through them as well. They're a registrar. But basically, for $10 a month, you get web hosting, and you get microcasting. And the only reason why it's called microcasting, not just because it's on micro.blog, but because you're limited in size on the file that you can upload. I think it's only like 30 to 50 megabytes. So that kind of forces you to think smaller when you're doing your recording. So you can't do like an hour-long podcast unless you compress the hell out of it, but I don't recommend that. But you can do like a 10 or 15 minute podcast, and a lot of the people on there take that opportunity to, instead of like blog, they do a microcast. And there's one guy, he does it, it's called the Chetcast, and he's on there with his 2 kids, and it's basically like a daily thing, and they just talk to each other and like, hey, this is what we're doing today, like, are you guys excited about this? Like, it's really cute, but it's only like 6 to 8 minutes long, and it's literally just that. And it tells you stats and stuff like that, and you get your own separate podcast feed. So if you wanted to upload it to iTunes, you can do that, or Spotify or Google Play, wherever you want to put them up. So you can do it that way. It's a great service. It's really easy to use. Plus, you get that built-in community, and so like they have an app that looks like Twitter, but it's not Twitter. And actually, the cool thing is, if you wanted to have a Twitter presence as well, you can cross-post from micro.blog to Twitter. So a lot of the stuff you see on my Twitter feed comes from micro.blog as well. So like I use it for a lot of photography stuff. Like anytime I post a picture, like they have a separate app called Sunlit, which is kind of like an alternative to Instagram, but it's only the micro.blog community. I can upload all my pictures to there. Like example, at the beginning of March, there was a giant tornado that came through Nashville, where I am.
Yeah.
And like it literally went through the neighborhood that I used to live in. So the next weekend, my wife and I went down there with a couple of our friends, and I took some pictures and, just walking through all the destruction and everything. But when I was done, I took, the 10 best pictures and put them up on micro.blog and wrote like a little blurb about it. And now it's on my website. So if you go to zakwinnick.com, you'll see that on there, and it's pretty cool. And it's a really nice looking site. And, I've been on and off there since I backed it on Kickstarter actually about 3 years ago. It was one of the first things I ever backed on Kickstarter. And, yeah, it was pretty cool. And it's run by a great guy. His name is Manton Reese. He's a software developer. He actually he developed a piece of software, speaking of Twitter, called Tweetmark, where that like Twitter apps used to use back in the day, where it would actually save your place in your timeline. So he wrote that. Yeah, it was really cool. And he's done some
I
other
remember
stuff.
that. I think it does. Does it do that now automatically? Is that one of the updates that they added, or no?
The official Twitter app does not do that, but there are other ones that use iCloud to sync. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Neat. So speaking of your process of posting stuff, that is something I wanted to pick your brain about, and might as well do it here while we're talking. So I've updated my podcast recording equipment over the last few years several times. You know, I've got systems where I can go out with just my phone and a couple of lavalier mics. I've got some like handheld mics that go into like a portable recorder. I have some nice condenser mics that go into the Pro Tools. And now I'm using this dynamic mic and the Rodecaster. And so recording it and mixing it and editing it and all that, I've totally got. But then I just have a file for me. And I'm familiar with some ways to share it. Like I can put it up on YouTube. I can put it up on Facebook. I can, I guess, upload the audio to SoundCloud or something. But all of your podcasts are like everywhere, right? They're on Spotify. They're on the iTunes Store. They're on like the Google Play Store. How do you do that? How would I go about doing that? Do I need an account with one of these fancy services that you have? Or are there any free options? Do you post it to one place and that distributes it, or do you have to do it individually?
So there's a bunch of ways you can do it. You can use micro.blog before micro.blog and even with micro.blog as well. You can get a WordPress website. You go to wordpress.com. It's free.
I have a WordPress.
Yeah, so you can add a plugin. It's called Blueberry, Blubrry, and basically what that does is you fill out all the information on the inside of it, like all the settings. So like what it does is it'll take your WordPress site and essentially give you that podcast feed, and it does all the enclosures and all the coding for you, and all you do is just upload the file, and you can put show notes and stuff in as if you were posting a WordPress post. But then you can take that special podcast feed out of WordPress and submit it to all of the podcasting aggregators, if you want to call it that. And it actually in there under each section, because it'll link back to those. So like it'll have a space for your iTunes one and your Spotify one and your Google one. It'll actually have a link right under it where you can click on it and it'll take you right to the submission page, and you can just copy and paste your podcast feed URL and just put it right in there, and then it just goes through an approval process. Apple usually just always approves everything unless it gets flagged. Like I had a I had a Dave Matthews Band podcast, and what I would do is whenever they would go out on tour, so they're one of the few bands left out there that actually allow their fans to tape all of their shows. And these guys bring like thousands of dollars worth of equipment to these concerts. They got like DAT recorders and now digital recorders and $3,000 microphones up on boom stands and like all this crazy
you used
stuff.
To bring your mini disc recorder.
Oh yeah, I used to bring my mini disc recorder everywhere. That thing was amazing. That's a different story too. Tell you about that one. I still have it and it still works. But yeah, I mean, so I did a Dave Matthews Band live podcast. It was called DMB Live Podcast. I had to stop doing it because Dave Matthews Band came out with a digital audio series called DMB Live, where they would release, unreleased shows from the past. So like, I think like now their oldest one is from like 1992. Anyway, so I would play music from like the current tour. I would play music from past tours. The very first time I uploaded that show to iTunes, it actually got denied. It's the only time I've ever had a podcast denied by iTunes.
And why was that? Was it because the content was copyrighted, or because the name, they were using the same name, DMB Live?
It was, so that podcast was before DMB Live started, like the official DMB Live. But it was because of the content that was in it. So they thought that the music was like bootleg music. But I was able to appeal it.
And it was.
Yeah. I mean,
but it was
a legal bootleg. So I had to write him an email to appeal it and tell him like, no, hey, the band allows taping and distributing like all the live shows. Like if you do the whole show and you don't convert it from lossless format to lossy format. So like there's a format called FLAC, FLAC. So it's a compressed, uncompressed file, if that makes sense. And so what people were doing was they were taking those files, compressing them down to MP3s and burning them to CDs, selling them in record stores, things like that. So you couldn't do that. So I had to like explain that to Apple, and eventually they approved the podcast. I did maybe about 10 or 15 shows of that, and then the tour was over. So I just never picked it back up because then DMB Live started.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can use WordPress, micro.blog, obviously. The only problem with that one is you have to submit them all yourself and know where to go on the websites. But a quick Google, Spotify for podcasters search will take you to the Spotify, Google Play for podcasts. It'll take you there also.
And you have to do each episode manually for each time, or you do it set it up once?
You have to do each feed manual or each aggregator one time. And basically all you're doing is you're telling them, hey, I'm starting a podcast, scrape this address every day or so. And, if there's basically anytime a new show gets posted, it'll update the feed, and then they just update on their end, every day, every 2 days, whatever. Now there's algorithms and stuff that will notice the popularity of your podcast, and like iTunes, like if you're like, Joe Rogan or NPR or something, it'll update that every 15 minutes, where if, you're Zak Winnick, it'll update it maybe every 2 or 3 days, which is fine.
Yeah.
Or you can force it to manually update. Anyway, every episode, you do not have to update it. It automatically does that for you.
Okay. So you don't upload it to each place. You would upload, in this case, your audio to your own WordPress site, and then iTunes and Spotify and Google would check back, and then they would pull your audio. And then does the podcast live? Do they take a copy of it that lives on their server, or does it always come from yours?
It always comes from yours, so that way you can always track your stats, and so that way, if you get 1,000 downloads, it'll show on WordPress 1,000 downloads, but then you can go back in each episode in iTunes or Spotify or wherever and see where those 1,000 came from. So, you might get 400 from iTunes, 200 from Spotify, and then the rest from Google, and you'll be able to see that breakdown. And the cool thing is, too, it uses IP addresses and all this stuff, so it'll geolocate where it's coming from. So not like specifically to, like your house, but like it'll say, oh, hey, this podcast was downloaded 20 times from Nashville, Tennessee. And then I'll probably be like, oh, it was me downloading it myself. Or, this podcast was downloaded, 20 times in Kazakhstan, which actually happened, which was really weird.
So it doesn't tell you how many listens because it doesn't know. Like my iPhone automatically downloads all the podcasts that I subscribe to, and they live on my phone, so I can listen to them on an airplane or not listen to them. So those people are going to know that I downloaded it, but they won't know anything else, right?
Right. They won't know, like, if you listen to it 3 times, they'll just see the one time that you downloaded it. And,
Yeah, okay.
And that's really the only stat that matters. It doesn't matter how many times you listen to it. It just matters how many times it gets downloaded. Like if you're thinking about getting sponsors for your podcasts or whatever, that's what they look at. Yeah, they want to know how many subscribers you had, how many plays you've had, how many impressions, things like that. It's like TV now. It's just who's your audience, what does it reach, things like that. If you want to be on Instagram or anything else, it's all the same.
Yeah, I'm not even thinking about sponsors yet. You don't have any sponsors on yours, do you?
I'm not against sponsors, but any podcast I don't make podcasts for money. I do it because it just satisfies that need that I have to listen to myself talk, basically.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So aside from micro.blog and that Blueberry WordPress plugin, are there any other ways that are easy to get your podcast out there to all the different places?
Yeah, one's really easy and it's really fun to use. And I like it because it has a really cool cover art generator. And that's Anchor FM. Anchor.
Oh, okay. I know Anchor.
Yeah.
We've used it for recording audio where you have people remotely and they're using their phones, and it always sounds bad to me, but I don't know if they have the ability to upload your own.
They do.
Do they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
I had before I decided to do microcasting on micro.blog, I did a microcast on anchor.fm. It's still up there. I think there's maybe 2 or 3 episodes called the Zakrocast. It's micro anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Get
dumb.
it.
And then my cover art was a zebra standing in the middle of a field. So it's like whatever. But you can record your own audio and then upload the file to Anchor. And then the really nice thing about Anchor is it takes care of all of that for you. So you upload your audio to Anchor and it'll distribute it all for you. You just check a box like, oh, I want it on iTunes. I want it on Spotify, Google, Deezer, what's the other one? Stitcher, things like that. It'll automatically do that for you, which is great, especially if you want to get into podcasting. And then the really nice thing too, if you want to kind of stick your toe into the water of sponsorships, there's a little radio button that you can click that'll turn on ads for your podcast, and it'll play one at the beginning and one at the end, and you get a little bit of money from it, and they play their ad. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't do that until I build a following. But yeah, so that's cool with Anchor. Now, do any of them allow you to have multiple podcasts? Like if I wanted to do, let's say, 2 different shows, would I need 2 different WordPress, 2 different blogs, 2 different accounts with Anchor? Okay.
Yeah, you would. Anchor only allows you to do one show at a time, which I kind of thought was annoying, but I get it. Micro.blog, you can have multiple blogs, multiple microcasts under the same account, and just switch back and forth between all of them. And especially now too, it's kind of cool. They just made some changes, where now you can even have multiple people posting microcasts. So if you wanted to have like a microcast, syndication network, so to speak, you can
like
have
a team.
one account and then have multiple people posting to it, and each one of their podcasts would have a separate feed and all that stuff. It's really cool. Like it's come a long way.
And who is that one through?
Micro.blog.
Micro.blog. Okay, now that's a pay service though.
Yeah, it's $5 a month for just a basic service, and then you pay an additional, I think it's maybe $5 or $10, for the ability to podcast. But then you also are able to upload video and photos as well. So it's kind of, well, more photos. Like you can.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Video. Are there any of these servers that allow video podcasts?
WordPress, if you do it through there, definitely does, because.
So you post your own video to your WordPress. When iTunes takes it, do they take the whole video file, or does anybody extract the audio from it?
Nope, it's the whole video file. Like it treats video files as video files, audio files as audio files. So,
Okay.
What a lot of people do is they'll post the video and then they'll post an audio only stream of the video as well.
Yeah, you'd probably have to call it 2 different things.
Yeah,
because somebody might want to subscribe to only the audio version.
Yeah, you would create 2 different posts, but all the software is smart enough to realize, oh, hey, this is a video file, this is an audio file. And
yeah, okay.
It'll still show up in the same feed, or you can actually, I think with WordPress and Blueberry and some other, Blueberry is the one that I use. There's multiple podcasting plugins for WordPress. You can actually have separate feeds for video, for audio. I don't think you can do separate podcasts just because of the way that it does it. But
Right.
The cool thing is if you get like a really awesome web host, all you have to do is just buy a domain name and then just point it to a different WordPress site. So like all my websites outside of the micro.blog ones are hosted on DreamHost. DreamHost, I've been with them for almost 15 years now. Great company based out of LA.
Since Global Internet Solutions.
Yeah, Global Internet Solutions. Jeez. Yeah, that was a fun time. If anybody listening to this wants a good time and a really fun story, look up Global Internet Solutions. And,
oh boy, do I have stories about that. That took me months to fight.
Oh, you and me both, because I got my dad's company, their website through them too, and it got shut down right in the middle of this giant project that we were trying to get off the ground, and people were trying to vet us, and then they go and they're like, "Oh, this account has been suspended," and we're just like, "Ugh."
Yeah, what a disaster that was. We'll have to do another program on that one.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. All the failures of the internet over the years.
Oy.
But yeah, I use
DreamHost.
DreamHost.
So DreamHost you like? I've been on GoDaddy since then.
Yeah,
and I've been happy with them.
Yeah, I mean DreamHost is awesome. $10 a month, you get unlimited storage, unlimited bandwidth, unlimited email addresses, unlimited domain names. Like everything is basically unlimited for $10 a month. It's awesome. And cool thing is they have what's called a one-click install. So let's say you get a domain name and you call it mypodcast.com, right? You add that to your DreamHost account, or you can even register the domain through DreamHost. And something really special about them too is every year or every few months, they'll just drop a credit into your account for a free domain name. So every time, every 3 or 4 months or so, I'll just go in and either renew one of my domain names with a free one or register a new domain name.
Oh, really? It counts on renewals.
Yeah. So it's really cool. But yeah,
that is cool.
Yeah, you just go in there, you add your site. It's really easy. They have really great instructions. Their customer support is fantastic. But what they'll do is you go in and one-click install, and they have WordPress on there, and it'll install your own WordPress instance on your domain, and you can point it to like a subdomain. You can put it as like a, mypodcast.com/show, like wherever you want to do, wherever you want to put it. It's really easy to put that in there and to do that. And then, then you're paying $10 a month and you have unlimited bandwidth. And the cool thing is too, they have a CDN, content delivery network as well. So if you were sharing files, like let's say, you're talking about, one of the things that's really big in tech circles is talking about the home screen on your devices. And so what a lot of people do is they'll take a screen capture of their home screen, on their iPad or whatever, and share it. Well, if you're anticipating a lot of people downloading it, you don't want it hosted on your site. You want it hosted someplace where people can get it fast. So you put it on this content delivery network, and you just link to it, and boom, then it's always there. But
oh, I see. Would it be that much slower on your own site? Or...
No, but it just depends on. I don't use it. Like, I don't have a need for it. I don't have millions of people listening to me, but there are some companies that that's what they use. So if it ever gets to that point, then it's something to look into. And even a lot of podcast networks are built on CDNs as well. So I know like the guys at Relay FM. Really big tech podcasting syndication company now. They use a lot of like CDN stuff, and they have their own servers and like all this. They're crazy, but they also have like 50 shows. It's awesome.
Okay, what about secure sites? Does DreamHost offer like HTTPS? Do you have any of that on your sites?
Every one of my sites is secured because there's a great company called Let's Encrypt. And it's actually run by the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, and they offer free SSL certificates. And the cool thing about DreamHost is they'll automatically renew it for you every time it expires, so you never go without having a secure.
That's cool. I don't have that. What does that cost to have for the
It's free.
certificates?
It's free.
It's free. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
I've heard that like for some of our sites, I've got like 10 different websites. That's now when you go to it, like in Chrome or any other web browser, they make a point to put a big banner on there that says this is not secure, and I'm not asking for any information about them, so it's just kind of a turnoff. So it might be worth looking into that.
The interesting thing about SSL too is that a lot of people use that to verify if a site is real. So like if you go to Microsoft.com as an example,
right.
Even if you just type in http://Microsoft.com, it'll reroute you to https://Microsoft.com because Microsoft has an SSL certificate. I don't know if you remember Microsoft.com back in the day, but I guarantee you that would not have HTTPS or a secure certificate on it. So
right, or the old WhiteHouse.com.
WhiteHouse.com, that's right. Well, we won't talk about much else about WhiteHouse.com now.
So are there any tips that you can offer me as I start my journey into the world of podcasting, as far as coming up with content ideas or delivery methods or building an audience? How do you build your audience? That's another thing I've been wanting to ask you.
Yeah, so it depends on what you're wanting to do with it. I've been doing it for so long. I come in with like a general idea, and I just kind of evolve it over time, just to kind of, I learn what works and what doesn't work. And, don't be afraid. So when I do stuff like this, I'm a perfectionist. Like, I've always been like that. high school, college, my entire life, I've just been a perfectionist when it comes to stuff that has my name attached to it that I'm putting out into the universe. You kind of have to let that go, because you can make a podcast as perfect as you think it is, but somebody's always going to find something wrong with it. And which this is one of the reasons why I haven't gotten into YouTube yet, because I see how the YouTube community treats people that have like millions of followers. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't want anything to do with that. But podcasting is kind of the same way, where, you know, just be comfortable enough with what you've got, and just know, especially since this is, you know, one of the first ones that you're doing, that you're going to mess up, that it's not going to be the greatest thing in the world. And don't be afraid to take constructive feedback and criticism and turn that into something that'll make your show better. Always have a clear, message, what you want to get out, like, you know, themes or whatever, specific topics, because I've found that people don't like when you talk about 10 different things. You know, focus on like 2 or 3 things. So I had a podcast maybe about 7 or 8 years ago called TechKaffe. And I did that with a couple of friends of mine, and we would do Skype podcasts and record it and put it up. We did about 20 shows. It lasted a really long time, and we had a lot of people listening. But we talked about everything from coffee to video games to movies to comics to, like, we were just kind of like all over the place. It was more like nerd culture. So like that was kind of like our focus, was like, hey, we're going to talk about nerdy stuff like computers, Apple, technology. And then I kind of let Todd and Tabby, the 2 other hosts, take over and talk about like the comic stuff and all that, because I had and like video games, and they were talking about like World of Warcraft and Minecraft and like all this stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, that's you guys. And actually now Todd runs a Twitch channel, and he's got like a lot of followers. I think his name on there is Hollywood Reaper, if anybody wants to watch him on that. Shout out to Todd. But you know, we you know, it was a mess, but it was a fun mess, and each one of us had our own separate communities that we were able to kind of promote it into. And so like Todd and I, the way that we met, we started our own paranormal investigation company in Las Vegas.
What?
And, yeah, and he's from Orange County. He actually lives in Long Beach now. He was from there, moved to Las Vegas, moved back. He was, if you ever saw the TV show Ghost Hunters on Sci-Fi, he was in a ghost or a paranormal investigation group that was affiliated with those guys as well. And so like he knew all of them, and so we kind of did that. And so we found people that were like that wanted to listen to that stuff. And you know, there was a big crossover between people that like paranormal investigating and all that stuff, and like gamers and tech nerds and things like that. So we did that. Tabby was a gamer, so she did another podcast that talked about like video games and stuff, so we had her on as one of our co-hosts. So like we had all these different places that we could cross promote our show, and we would have guests on from other shows, and we'd go on other shows and stuff like that, or at least Todd would. I never had time. You know, it was great. It was a fun podcast, but it was a organized mess. That's what I like to call it. And you know, we would do like a rough outline of what we would do, what we wanted to talk about, and certain points to hit on the show. But it was 45 minutes to an hour of just pure chaos, and it was great, and it was so much fun. I actually still have all of those episodes, and I still have the domain name registered, so I might bring it back one day with Todd and Tabby. I don't know, or maybe just by myself. So yeah, we would do that maybe once a week, and then we had another weekly one that either Todd or myself would do that we called TechKaffe Decaf. And it was basically just because the tech world moves so quickly and the gaming world moves so quickly with like new releases, things like that. It was just kind of like a 15-minute, like, here you go, throw it out there. Like, here's a rundown of all the news for the week. And so, you know, that was kind of like our focus. But like, you know, whenever I would, soda. Whenever I would do a podcast, like it would be a music podcast, and I would talk about, you know, the artists that I was playing or the music that I was playing, or like the StickWorld Podcast, like it focused on stick players and stick news, like anything with it. You know, if Greg Howard, who's one of the bigger, well-known Chapman stick players, came out with a new album, I would talk about that. Or, you know, if there was a new video posted by Emmett Chapman, who was the guy that created it, I would hey, here's a link to Emmett's video, or show Emmett's video when I was doing the video cast. Always have that focus. As you can tell, I'm not focused on this description, but
No, so but you're saying, yeah, keep it focused, and you also used the fact that you had a large network of hosts and co-hosts, that they were able to attract people from their different networks.
Yeah, never be afraid. Like, I'm sure as you know, working in like the film industry and everything, like, it's all about who you know, and it's all about the contacts that you make. Never be afraid to, reach out to somebody and just be like, hey, do you want to be on my show? And if they say yes, be like, hey, if you have social media, could you cross promote it? And just be like, hey, I'm going to be on Corin's show, on this day. Like, hey, tune in, things like that. That's the only way that's the number one way that people will find out about your show is word of mouth.
Be the guest. All right. Well, when I post this, I'm going to be asking you to share it then.
Absolutely. I'll put it everywhere I possibly can.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Twitter, I'll even put it up on Facebook, which I hate getting on. So I'll do that too.
Cool. Yeah. I'll do the same.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. So, definitely. And then when you're putting together a show, like, you always have an outline. Just know what you're going to talk about when you go into it. Don't just like wing it. That's probably the worst thing you can do, because then you just sound unorganized, or you have to go back and edit it a lot. That's the one thing that I like about the shows that I do. Like, I don't do a lot of editing. I sit there and I think about what I'm going to say, if it's a music podcast, what I'm going to play. And then I know, okay, I'm going to play this Jethro Tull song. So then I can talk about, oh, well, hey, after the Jethro Tull song, like, that was Aqualung by Jethro Tull. And, it was in Anchorman and like all this stuff. You think of some fun facts, and, that way I can just go through and just nail it. And if I mess up, then I can just re-record it, and, then I can just copy and paste that section. And I've done that before. I've recorded a 45-minute show, and then I messed up the end, and I'm just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to redo the whole thing. And then it was always 100 times better. Or, maybe you want to go through and treat it like linearly, and, go through and edit out all the ums and uhs and pauses.
I've done that. It hardly seems worth the work.
Yeah, so it really isn't.
I think my first few I'll edit a little bit, but eventually I'd like to get to the point where I can hit record and know that that's what you see is what you get.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to tell you you're going to be like this out of the box, but like, if you listen to like the Joe Rogan podcast, or you listen, I mean, even listen to Howard Stern on the radio. I know he's been doing it for like 50 years, but they don't edit any of their stuff. Like, Joe Rogan doesn't edit his podcast.
No, and they've got 3-hour shows every day.
Yeah, and I mean, they've been doing it for a while, but they've also
he's got thousands.
But it's like this. It's just a conversation, and it's just you're the one in charge. If you don't like how something sounds or looks, you don't have to use it. So just know that you have creative control, but then also know that you need to stay focused on what your end goal is. And then the only other thing that I can suggest is, if you have a regular posting schedule, stick to it. So if you're like,
I'm not planning on having one, but
eventually down the road, I mean,
I know I should.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to say, I'm going to do this show every week, do it every week. Shows come out every Friday, by 3:00, have it out by Friday, 3:00. That's kind of like, I was doing a microcast when all of the stuff with the coronavirus started, and I was pretty good about it. I did it for maybe the first like 4 or 5 weeks. Well, I was doing it every day, and then I was like, all right, well, I'll do it every week, because there isn't anything to report every day. And then it just kind of got to the point where every week I was saying the same thing. So I'm just like, all right, well, I'm just going to do this now whenever I feel like it, if there's something new to update. So like, I might do one this coming week, because Davidson County, which is the county that Nashville is in, is entering their phase 1 or phase 2, phase 1, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't live in Davidson County anymore, so I have no clue. The only thing that's impacted by that is my work. So, I might throw a microcast out there to talk about that a little bit, and might have some other news coming as well. So I'll throw that in there. So hopefully I'll know more about that by the end of the week.
I'll be eagerly listening and hoping for good news for you.
Yeah, I think you're like the only person that listens to my microcast. So
does it show you one download?
Yeah, well, it shows me like maybe 30 or 40, but I'm not entirely convinced that it's not my podcast app, like just pinging my site.
Cool. All right. Well, Zach, I appreciate all the information. You gave me a lot of good tips and advice on starting a podcast, how to run with it, and then also where to post it. If anyone wants to know more information about Zach or wants to find out his publications, you can check out zakwinnick.com or zach.micro.blog. They might be the same site now.
They are.
I don't know.
Right. For now, I might be changing it a little bit. There's another great site. It doesn't do microcasting or podcasting, called blot.im, and I kind of want to use that for personal stuff, and then I'll use my micro.blog stuff for like microcasts and stuff. So we'll see.
Yeah, good way to separate it.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you coming on and talking to me and being my very first podcast guest for my own personal program.
I'm very honored to be your first guest, and I hope to come back because we can talk a lot more about some other stuff that doesn't involve podcasting, I'm sure.
I'd love to have you back. So we'll be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
You got it.
And cut.